Longevity lab number 3.
I'm in a mood. It's been a really stressful 24 hours for us. And we're going to get through this podcast that I was really excited to make for you all about longevity and muscle and how important muscle is.
When in doubt, all you need to do is tell Juliet to talk about muscle, and she's much better off.
But first, I need to just clear how stressed out I am from the last 24 hours. We're moving. Our cat decided to have a nonstop puke session yesterday, like every 15 minutes, throwing up everywhere. It was really scary, and we had to go to the hospital. And then there was just some confusion about our move, if we were starting our lease tomorrow or if we were starting it in 2 weeks. And it caused a whole drama with our new landlord.
Words being misconstrued over written
Yeah,
language.
this is where text gets really tricky.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to digest it all and understand that this is just a moment in time and this is going to pass. But I feel like fight or flight surging through my body. Like I was enraged last night just from the whole day. Yeah.
Thankfully, Martha's okay.
Yes. Martha
We
is
had some
good.
tests done, and she's perfectly healthy, perfectly fine. We don't know why she threw up.
We think it's from the new medication that she started on because she got diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. And then we started giving her this pill. But then we also noticed that she wasn't taking the pill always. We would put it in her mouth, close her mouth, rub her throat, do all the things you're supposed to do to get the cat to swallow the pill. And then I was finding the pills randomly, like under the couch.
Far away from where we give them to her. So
One
she
of
puts them
them,
in her mouth, and she holds them there,
yeah,
and then
she's a
takes
bad
them to another
patient,
side of the house and then spits them out.
bad little girl. And I found one in her tail. That was crazy. I'm like, "What is this doing in your tail?"
She didn't hide the evidence.
So we don't even know how much of the medication she took, but we're pretty sure that that's what was causing
Well, so
her
once we
issue.
started really focusing and making sure that she was fully eating the medication, that's when she started throwing up, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
This kind of has to do with longevity stuff when we're talking about protein, and our cat definitely needs a different diet 'cause she's having a hard time.
She eats a lot of protein.
Yeah, but
She doesn't have enough muscle.
that particular protein isn't maybe good for her, they were thinking, so we might have to switch it out. Just like humans, sometimes certain foods work for some people and they don't work for other people.
What would you do if your doctor said that you were allergic to chicken?
Me?
Yeah.
Ooh, that'll be tough for me. I
Yeah.
love chicken. It's like a staple in my diet. I mean, could I switch to turkey? I could do turkey.
I don't know.
That one works for me. I don't know, I'd have to figure it out, but I'm really glad that I'm not allergic to chicken because it's something I eat pretty much every single day of my life, sometimes twice a day, lunch and dinner.
And
Uh,
that's how Martha feels.
I know there's controversy around chicken and what certain fats are in chicken, and there's all the carnivore people saying that we should only be eating red meat, and I hope that we can clear some of this stuff up for everyone because there's a lot of fake news on the internet, and there's just a lot of people touting things that aren't necessarily scientifically backed. And if they do have science backing it, they're like very cherry picked data points from studies that we could also cherry pick other data points to
Yeah,
prove them wrong. It's
a
crazy.
lot of these diets and ideas come about by mechanisms. So one of the things that Lane Norton talks about is people hang on to a mechanism. So if you eat this, it causes this to rise in your body, which is associated with increased cancer risk. So they create this narrative that if you're going to eat this, this increases X substance in your body, and that's not good. But what they don't talk about is actual peer reviewed studies that prove that that mechanism is actually what's going on. So if you look at the studies that carnivore people might say that you shouldn't be eating carbs, and there's a lot of studies that say carbs are great for you, right? And in our personal experience, if you're working out and you're out there for a decent amount of time, for over an hour, you know that you need some carbs and you're going to feel much better if you do so. So,
Yeah, so hopefully we can clear up that as we continue this podcast and having real experts on the show and not Instagram experts,
Some
which
Instagram experts are good. Like some
no,
people
that's true.
are real experts in real life and they just so happen to be on Instagram. And then there's other people who became popular on Instagram because of, the stuff that they speak about.
Yeah, and something I was sharing with Mackie before I came on is I was noticing different influencers online who are trying to get you to notice them by a certain look that they have. And this is a psychological tactic that works where if you have a certain costume that you wear, people are gonna be drawn to you. Let's say you wear, like, really funny glasses or you grow your mustache to look
Dave
really
Asprey
weird.
used to wear the blue blocker sunglasses, which were like yellow
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah,
Was that on purpose, though, for
he did
people
that on
to and
purpose.
said that?
Well, he hasn't said that, but he definitely did it on
See,
purpose.
I'm fine if you wanna do that, but say it. Tell people that you know, I just feel like there's a lot of trickery going on,
Yeah.
and you and I do a lot of research on sales and marketing, and there's all of these sales and marketing tactics that I'd like to share with people because I think it's important that, like, the more you know, then you can have a really discerning way of picking who you wanna believe and work
Yeah.
with. Not to say that it's bad that somebody's putting a costume on for attention if they have really great information, because I get that we have that everybody's trying to vie for the
You
spotlight,
gotta play the game to a degree,
but
right? Even if you
mhm,
have good information and you have good intentions at heart, if you're gonna get any kind of attention, you might have to play the game a little bit.
I know. I have a hard time with that.
I get it. I mean, I'm not in the game of social media and I need to
You
be, but
do. My clients are
I
like, "How
know,
come
I
Mackie's
know.
not on social media that much? He should be." I'm like, "Well, it's better for your mental health, that's for sure."
I have a lot of other stuff going on. I'm growing out my mustache though, so I can, gain attention with the mustache. What do you think?
Can you insert cricket noises right now?
That's what Alex Hormozy did when he sold his company. They actually licensed the silhouette of him and his mustache because the mustache had become so intertwined with the brand.
And that was on purpose.
That was on
So you
purpose.
think he actually wanted to have that mustache? Did he enjoy it, or he just wore that because it got him attention?
I would say it's probably 60-40. He wore it because it got attention 60%, 40% he probably liked it too.
Wow. I'm wondering
He's a weird guy. He always wears a breathe right strip when he goes on podcasts.
well, I think that's
That's
also
another one.
that's the
Yeah.
attention seeking
Yeah.
thing because would you consider that, like, peacocking? Is that like a
Yeah.
peacock technique?
Yeah, it's just a
Did
way to stand out from the crowd that gives you attention.
I
It gets
think
people to scot like, if they're scrolling, and then you see this weird guy with a mustache and a breathe right strip on talking to you, like, with giant muscles, that might make you stop scrolling
what are we gonna
and
do
pay
with you
attention.
then? We need to come up with some ideas of how you need to peacock yourself a little bit more. What do you think? We can
I don't
get you,
know.
like, a cape and a crown.
Well,
Wha
perfect example of that is what's his name?
Who?
Uh, Primal guy.
Oh, Liver King.
Liver King, yeah.
Yeah, no, he is the prime example of somebody who's has a look for
Yeah.
attention, and it works.
And the raw meat and all that.
Yeah, yeah, it's all posturing and all
Yeah.
but I've watched quite a few YouTubes with him because it's working. It's drawing you in because
It is
it's like a freak
entertaining.
show, right? It's like a
Yeah.
circus. You can't look away,
Yeah.
and he seems to actually eat the raw testicles and all the things.
He definitely does it.
Like, daily, you think, or just when he's on camera?
He records a lot of videos and social media stuff, so it's basically daily.
But do you think behind closed doors, he's eating, like, cooked food and, like, making cookies?
I have no idea. Whatever he's
We
doing.
can't trust anything he says because he also said he wasn't on steroids forever and then finally admitted that he's been on steroids. Like,
Right.
duh.
Yeah.
No one looks like that. It's insane.
Well, one
Also
of
from what he
the other
eats.
thing that you can look at with Liver King is he talks about eating raw liver, eating all these different things, organ meats, and then he sells you the pill. But he's talking about, "Oh, everything you should be eating should be unprocessed." Well, what do you think has to happen for me to get a liver pill?
Mm,
It has to be
for
processed.
$70.
Yeah.
Remember how pissed I was when I got them and I found out that it was his brand? So I've been told this by my physician, by my acupuncturist over the years that I would benefit from taking some organ meats, and I am not very brave to eat them, so I bought a supplement to try, and then I found out that I was using the Liver King supplement. I was like, "No, this man does not need any more money or attention, damn it."
And what were your results from taking them?
I didn't really notice anything, but I didn't take them that much to it's hard with supplements to really know what's working, what's not. Because I do a lot of things in conjunction with each other, so it's really hard to isolate what the thing is.
Yeah, and even if you do get a 1% boost, are you gonna notice it? It's really hard to tell.
And that really goes into what we're talking about today, which is food is one of the most powerful tools that we really need to leverage when it comes to our health and building muscle. And we're going to give you the 6 reasons why you need to build muscle for longevity today. I wanted to open with talking about just personally my experience with how impactful muscle is on our body. And that was from seeing my mom and what happened with her cancer. And the fact that my mom was not strong enough to even receive cancer treatment. And what ultimately took my mom's life was actually a fall. So my mom fell while she was walking to get coffee one day, and she had been complaining about having hip pain over the summer. And we actually had a vacation with my mom. We rented this really awesome Airbnb in upstate New York, and I'm so happy that we have that memory of spending time with her. But that's when we noticed something was a little bit off, and she was limping a bit, and she was saying that walking was just painful.
Yeah, that was the first sign of things going south. We didn't know why, but yeah, she was not feeling great on that trip.
And I wish I could take back the fact that I was a little bit hard on her and saying she needs to move and exercise and go to physical therapy because I was assuming that she just had very weak muscles because, like many people over the pandemic, my mom's life became even more sedentary than it was prior. My mom was never someone who did formal exercise. Something she always had a goal of, and she would ask me questions and talk about it, but she never went and pursued it. And I just think that has a lot to do with her generation. She was born in the 50s, and it just exercise really didn't become a big thing until, I don't know, more like the 90s, 2000s, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe the '80s with Richard
That's
Simmons
true.
and
But it was still like
that era.
it wasn't as popular as it is now as far as boutique gyms everywhere and,
Right, you couldn't go places. They were starting to sell, like, VHS tapes and
yeah.
that kinda thing, but and there obviously were gyms at that time, but
And I just think that it was not all people worked out. It was a subset of people that were into fitness. And my mom was in like the rock and roll
right.
group and they were smoking pot and hanging out. Like,
I think back in, like, the '80s, '90s, you either were an athlete working out to perform in your sport, or you're, like, a bodybuilder. There
yeah, the
wasn't really
bodybuilder was
people
huge.
yeah, there weren't, like, people in the middle, like, general population just working out to be healthy as much.
Yes, exactly. So it had to be almost like a hobby
Yeah.
to be someone who exercised. So my mom had lofty goals of doing something, but she never pursued it. And she did walk though. I would say not as much as she could have, and that was another thing that I was on top of her about, and I think we all can get this way with our loved ones that we see what's best for them, and we sometimes want to impose on them what we think would be best, especially being in my field and having my mom be a smoker and pretty sedentary. It was hard for me to see that because I know what the repercussions of that could be down the line, and I would share that with her, and she was on her own journey with that, but I assume that she just had muscle weakness and some tightness from sitting all the time. So I encouraged her to go to see a physical therapist, and she thought maybe she had like rheumatoid arthritis or something going on. So she got lab work done that did show she had very high inflammatory markers. So that was the first kind of sign that something seems a bit off. But like many of us, my mom put off going to the next appointments to pursue anything further. they wanted her to get some imaging done of her hip, and
I think she
she
was so stuck on the idea that she needed to go to physical therapy at that moment. She was like, "I'm going to physical therapy. That's what I need."
yeah. And then one day when my mom was actually walking back from physical therapy, she went to stop and get a coffee in her neighborhood and she tripped on a curb and she fell and she dislocated her elbow and broke her wrist. So I get a phone call from my brother saying, "Mom's in the hospital. She broke her wrist, dislocated her elbow." And then this whole 6-month journey began of us not knowing she had cancer. This was in October. We did not find out that she had stage 4 lung cancer until January. So we're going through this whole process of her going into a rehab facility because, again, with this hip issue, she was having a really hard time walking. And so without having her arm now available to her, she was really off balance and she was a fall risk even more than before. And so she was in a rehab facility where she could have her needs taken care of. And mm, I don't want to go into all of the details of that, but I will just share with you that the rehab facility was not what I wished it had been,
Yeah, to say the
to
least.
say the least. And I know that I think I spoke about this in our first podcast. That is just the nature of the system, and actually, not even if you have a lot of money, it's just that's what these clinics are, that's what these rehabs are. Even I have a friend who she was at, like, the best of the best private care rehab for her father, and it was still really tough, and they weren't getting great care, and it's just hard to staff it. There's so many people in them, and my mom really suffered a lot being there, and I wish that I had could have made that situation a lot better for her, but we really were doing the best that we could with the tools that we had and what was available to us. But I don't wanna ramble on too much about her situation, but
Like,
talk about this story for
she
2
I
hours, and I
know.
don't wanna do that
Get
to
to the
people. I don't
point.
wanna you all
I
be
know.
like, sad for me and crying. Yeah, it sucks. It was so fucked up and sad, honestly.
Let's get to the reason why you brought this up, though, which is why she was unable to take part in some of the therapies and take part in some of the potential
Treatments.
chemos or treatments that would have been able to potentially help.
And you can leave all that in. Just
Leave it in?
leave it in, all the stuff. You can see, guys, how hard this is hard podcasting and being really vulnerable, and I'm sitting here with a lump in my throat because it's still fresh. My mom just passed away at the end of May, and I do want to have that be a part of my story with everyone to understand just how grief impacts us all, and I also think that it's important to talk about this because this really fueled my fire around helping people and with what Mackie and I are doing with our company. This is a big reason why we're doing longevity medicine, preventative care now. So, because my mom was very frail and had no muscle on her body, she was unable to receive treatments and she was really unable to push herself even in physical therapy. She had to have strength to get stronger, and that she didn't have a baseline of any kind of strength. And so what ended up happening to my mom is that she became bedbound, and through that, it really accelerated her decline, and she passed away within 6 months. Now, she did have a stage 4 lung cancer that spread to her bones and different parts of her body, but there she would have been able to at least try some treatment and see if she could have extended her life had she had more strength in her body. And this is
I think even the diagnosis was pushed off of lung cancer was pushed off because of her lack of strength, right? Because she would have had that surgery on her arm much sooner, and really the surgery is what led to the discovery of the lung cancer.
yeah,
So
yeah.
she had the injury in October, and she didn't have surgery till January. So if the reason why it was pushed off was because she was so weak.
Well, she had multiple surgeries, if you remember. She had surgery, like, right away and then had to have it again.
Right, you're
Yeah.
right, yeah.
But definitely, moral of the story is we have to be strong and we have to have muscle. And this is not about looking good in a bathing suit. This is about our life. And this is about living longer and healthier and happier. And muscle is just one of the most important things that we can have. And I'm going to quote Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, who I love and has something called a muscle centric medicine approach. She says muscle is perhaps the most important organ system to combat our current health crisis, regain exceptional health, and maximize physical performance. Muscle health becomes more important as we age, yet it is often the most overlooked, even by modern day medical practices. Muscle centric medicine focuses on this, the organ of longevity. Muscle is fast becoming the sixth vital sign. And we see this talked about a lot more with longevity being such a hot topic right now. And we need to understand, why is it important to have muscle and how do we do it? Because it really it's simple, yet it does take effort to build muscle and keep muscle. And
Right, it's
especially when we get
simple but
older,
not
it takes
easy.
yeah, it's not simple, not easy. But there are things that we need to be informed about as to how to build muscle and not be afraid of it, because I can't tell you how many of my female clients are still super afraid of building muscle because they don't wanna bulk up,
Right.
but I want you to bulk up. Skinny is Skinny might be sexy to you now in your photos. Skinny is not sexy when you can't get out of bed and you can't fight an illness. That's not sexy. We need to really move away from thin being looked at as success, because we need to think of strong and more and muscular. And I don't mean like a look, because everybody has their own body shapes and types, but we need to have a certain amount of muscle on our
Yeah,
body.
having lean muscle mass on your body is one of the biggest predictors of longevity. I think it's the second having muscle and or having strength
Mhm.
are the second most correlated statistics with longevity behind VO2 max.
And having some actual muscle development, like muscles you can see, because that is we want to be able to see them on our body to know that we have them.
Right. But also skeletal muscle is very important too.
Yes. Yeah. So it's the largest organ in your body, the muscular system, and it's basically your metabolic currency. It plays a vital role in fighting inflammation throughout your body. It's also the largest site for glucose metabolism, which is critical for reserving insulin resistance and preventing or even treating chronic illness such as diabetes or cognitive decline. And we are having an epidemic of Alzheimer's right now, which many physicians are calling type 3 diabetes. Yes, there is Alzheimer's that can have a genetic factor, but there is a lot of Alzheimer's that's coming from our nutrition and our lack of health and muscle.
What do they mean by type 3 diabetes?
Well, basically, it still has to do with your body's response to insulin.
Mm,
So that your body not being able to shuttle insulin out of the bloodstream is not only causing type 2 diabetes, but it can cause issues in our brain health, such as Alzheimer's. So both things, one can happen or both can happen.
right.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about this muscle centric medicine from Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, because I just love it. I love that she has trademarked muscle centric medicine. This is my kind of medicine, because this is fitness and strength training, and eating a high protein diet has been something that I have done for a very long time. And as far as my own personal results with it, I've been able to really regulate my blood sugar, have consistent energy, keep a lot of lean mass, and continue to build more mass on my body, which makes me more metabolically flexible too. So I can eat a lot, and I'm not always eating what you think that a fitness professional is eating, just a bunch of protein and vegetables. I eat lots of carbohydrates. In fact, as Mackie said earlier, we need carbs. It's very important actually to shuttle the protein into your muscle. So you need carbohydrates to help with muscle protein synthesis. And I also eat not what you would think as being like quote unquote clean food. And I like it that way because I get to enjoy my life. And I think that that's important, that we can have food freedom as well. That's not like a free for all for us to just go and eat McDonald's. I think we have to be respectful of what foods are helping us versus harming us, but I think that we also can enjoy our life.
I think it allows you the ability to go to McDonald's every once in a while, once a year when you're on your road trip
Would I ever?
to get Diet Coke. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. But and I'm not
We
I'm not and
but
I'm not trying
but,
to be a hypocrite, but there are places that I draw the line, and I draw the line at something like a McDonald's.
right.
I will not.
I get it, I get it. I don't eat there either other than their Diet Coke. Little known fact that they are really well known for their soda fountains. They pay special attention to that, so if you ever are in the mood for a Diet Coke, go to
You
McDonald's.
do realize that we mentioned Diet Coke on our first podcast too, right?
We love Diet Coke,
Oh,
it's no
we
lie.
don't have Diet Coke in our house even. No, we
I think
like
we talk about it because we don't have it that
I know, we're
much.
like, "Oh,
Diet Coke.
I just want one of those. It's like forbidden fruit." But I really wanted to get this information out because this is what Mackie and I are basing our whole company off of, and I think it's just a message that we need to spread far and wide about how important it is to build muscle. And like Mackie said, it's simple but not easy. I wanna tell you guys right now the 6 reasons why we need it, and then I'm also gonna share with you how you do it.
Oh,
All right. 3, 2, 1, and here we go. All right. First of all, metabolic efficiency. Muscle tissue is metabolically active, meaning it burns more calories at rest compared to fat. And this helps in maintaining a healthy weight and improving overall metabolic health. I think I have to fact check myself, but I think for every pound of muscle you gain, you burn an extra 50 calories or you add an extra 50 calories to your basal metabolic rate for every pound of muscle extra you have on your body, which is a really good reason to build more muscle if you like to eat like me. I'm a big eater. And so I have been able to increase my resting metabolic rate just by simply having more muscle on my body.
so
Which
what did you say?
I think it was 50 calories on your basal metabolic rate.
Yeah, according to studies, a pound of muscle burns 6 to 10 calories per day.
Oh, so less,
Yeah.
6 to 10. Okay. But if you have 5 pounds of muscle, that's 50 extra calories that you're burning a day. I know
Yes.
that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. It adds
Yeah.
up. Because really, the things that burn the most calories in your day are your resting metabolic rate and your non-exercise activity. Because if you think about you working out for 1 hour and burning a few hundred calories, that's not that many. The calories that you need to rely on actually burning more of is just your body existing and having muscle, and then just doing things around the house or even fidgeting.
Well, that's like compound interest. If you think about if you had to manually go and do 10 calories worth of cardio on a daily basis per pound of muscle that you build, that's automatically going to happen. You wake up, if you've got that extra pound of muscle, you're going to burn that 6 to 10 calories per day automatically without having to think about going to do the 10 calories of cardio.
Exactly. And 10 calories could take a minute or so
Yeah, I mean,
of hard effort.
at an intense
Of hard
effort.
effort,
Yeah.
yeah. Also, aging, as we're talking about, and sarcopenia is something we really need to think about. As people age, we naturally lose muscle, and that's a condition known as sarcopenia. So, maintaining muscle mass is crucial for preserving strength and mobility, which are essential for independence in our older age. I don't know about you guys, but I really envision myself being able to walk independently and go on a hike when I'm 70s and beyond. And when I see people doing that, I feel so much joy for them. Today, I actually went on a run on a trail and I saw a lot of older people walking and hiking on that
It's
trail.
amazing.
And it made me feel so good for them. Like, you're able to come out here and experience beautiful nature and move your body, which gives you feel good chemicals, and you're not bound to your chair or a bed. So, as I'm talking about my mom and everything, that is really for me, one of the number one reasons to do this now. And you can build muscle at any age. So if you're listening and you are 50, 60, however old you are, it doesn't matter. You can start whenever to build muscle and you can do it. I've seen 80, 90-year-olds. I had 90 something year old clients. I loved working with them, and their motivation for working out was always a lot better than the motivation with my like 20 something year old clients, where it was just like, I want a hot body. They're like, I want to be able to go up and down the stairs
Right.
by myself and not have to worry about falling and breaking something.
There's 2 things here for me that really caught my eye, and one is obviously that as you do get older, it does become more challenging to build muscle. And for men, we have our type 1 muscle fibers become less prevalent than our type 2 muscle fibers, which are more of our endurance muscle fibers. So as we get older, it gets harder to build that lean muscle in the gym. So not only are you going to have to work harder, but also your body. The second thing I wanted to mention was that your body doesn't absorb protein as well as you get older. You're at a deficit in both fronts because you can't get the nutrition. Even if you're eating all that protein, how much of it are you actually absorbing versus when you're a little bit younger? So that's why I talk about muscle being sort of your savings account. As you're younger, it's important to put that muscle into your savings account now while it's easier to build, easier to gain, and then be able to maintain it. It's much easier to maintain over time than to build.
Yeah, and which is why you do need more protein, which we're gonna talk about in the last 5 minutes of
Beautiful.
that's one of the most important things to actually build muscle. You have to have protein. And big myth around that we're over proteined. We're actually under proteined. And yeah, that's one of the bro sciencey things that's out there that we are eating too much protein. Most people aren't getting enough. And I can tell you when I work with clients and I have them log, my female clients will sometimes share with me that they're only getting 60, maybe 80 grams per day, and they're eating so little, which is also contributing to that. And that's creating low energy availability for them, which is making it so that they can't be lean and they're just gaining more body fat. That's another thing that is important to think about. We need to be eating enough food too. And we're sort of afraid of eating because we think that the eating is directly correlating to us gaining weight in the form of body fat, but not necessarily.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have that. I've struggled. I've been trying to gain weight to get up to increase some muscle mass, and I struggle to get the amount of calories that I know that I need.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, "Here's a sandwich."
And
I brought you a 1,000 calorie sandwich today for lunch.
I probably would have eaten a 300 calorie wrap if it wasn't for that.
I know, I know. And so just some things that we have to think about and be a little more conscious of. Bone health, we wanna make sure that we have enough muscle strength because it's closely linked to bone health. Strong muscles support and protect our bones, reducing the risk of osteoporosis and fractures. We also wanna make sure that we're doing certain types of exercise that will help with this, like plyometrics. And I have seen even my senior clients doing little jumps, box jumps, things that we don't need to be afraid of as far as hurting our joints when done properly with the right technique and scaled to your level of where you're at. These are exercises that are phenomenal for your body. Also, jumping rope can be really great. So, bring in some jumping into your life and plyometrics if you're not doing that already to help you with longevity and bone health. Um, blood sugar regulation. Blood sugar regulation is something that I am so passionate about and have been for years because it impacts your hunger levels, it impacts your mood, your mental health, and we want to make sure that we are utilizing glucose during muscle contraction. So this helps in regulating blood sugar levels when we're working out, when we're lifting weights and doing resistance training, and it's especially important when we're managing things like trying to prevent diabetes. And diabetes is not just associated with being obese. Diabetes is associated with blood sugar dysregulation, which many people have even if they are at a healthy body weight. We talk about overall health and longevity, but strong muscles contribute to better balance, reduced injury risk, and improved performance in all your daily activities. Muscle mass and strength are also associated with increasing your longevity. And then hormonal balance, which is particularly important for my female clients who have changes in their hormones as they enter perimenopause and menopause. Muscles influence the production and regulation of various hormones in your body. For example, exercise induced muscle contractions release myokines, which have an anti inflammatory effect and promote healthy metabolic and physiological processes. And something else to note is that estrogen is really a driving force behind being able to have these muscle contractions and power output. And as our things like our estrogen and our testosterone and our progesterone start to change as we get older, we need to mimic these hormones through different types of exercise, including strength training. So, especially for women, muscle mass, which naturally declines due to hormonal changes, we've got a little bit of a bigger uphill battle to fight than our guys do, but it's nothing that can't be done with understanding how our body works, which I just think back to what I learned about the female body, and I learned nothing when I was growing up. I learned nothing about my period. Like, I did not know about the my menstrual cycle and the different phases of it when I was younger. I had to that was all stuff I had to read books and it was all self-taught, which is so frustrating because as women, we don't even know what's happening in our bodies half the time or what's to come as we're aging. And then we have all of these side effects that are happening to us, like mood changes, all of a sudden you have a belly, you don't have as much energy, your sex drive changes. And these are things that if we understood what's happening, we could work with them versus just feeling helpless around it because I think that we just don't have the knowledge to even understand it. So I want to empower you to learn about your body. And there that Dr. Stacy Sims has a wonderful book called Roar, ROAR, that I highly recommend if you want to gain more insight into your hormones as an athlete, especially if you're working out. I consider everybody an athlete if you're working out. So if you want to get more insight into your hormones and exercise, that's a great book that I recommend. So how do we do this, right? We talk about all of the benefits of building muscle on our body, but how do we actually do it? We want to make sure that we're doing resistance training. And what does that look like? Because I get a lot of questions like, is body weight resistance training enough? Like yoga, which I'm going to tonight because it's my practice in life. I love yoga so much. It just helps my mental health and also it's great for mobility. And Pilates is another awesome form of exercise that's really good for strengthening your core, helping you with alignment. Are those activities covering it as far as creating lean mass on our body? And what I'll say to that is if you are someone who's very deconditioned and that's your first foray into resistance training, then you will see some strength gains and some muscle from doing those kinds of activities if you are stressing the body out enough. And with anything that I talk about, we do need to be pushing ourselves to the point where we have adaptation happening. If we're going too easy, then that's not going to happen. Now, in the beginning, we want to make sure our technique is correct for anything that we do yoga, Pilates, weight training. We have to take into account that we may not be able to go hard in the paint right away. And that is going to be different for everyone. I have worked with clients where just doing a few body weight squats is quite exhausting on their body. And that is creating adaptation. And then once we can get to doing, let's say, 10 or 12 body weight squats and we have energy to keep going, that's when we can put some more demand on the system and start to increase the weight. And that goes also for any of you who are strength training with free weights or barbells, any kind of resistance training when you're able to hit the rep range, this is general, but this is my rule of thumb when I'm working with clients. If we can get to about 12 to 15 of something, that is an indicator that we can go up in weight.
Yeah, it's one interesting study that came out a few years ago was saying that it doesn't really matter how many reps you do as long as you get to pretty close to complete failure with your exercise, with your movement there. If you're getting 6 reps, it's the same as if you're getting 15 reps, even up to 20 reps, as long as you're getting to the point where like the last two reps to the last rep is very challenging for you.
Yeah, we talk about something called your RPE, which is your rate of perceived exertion when we're programming. And when I'm working with a client, I'm going to put in an RPE typically of around an 8 when we're strength training. And what Mackie is sharing is that means that you really don't have only 1 or 2 reps in reserve. So if you're looking at workout programs online or if you're working with a trainer and they're saying RPE, that's your rate of perceived exertion. If they're saying RIR, that's your reps in reserve. We're not necessarily looking to go to complete failure every time, and that can be quite a lot on our nervous system as
Right.
well. But we are looking to go to about that 80% when we're training, where we're feeling pretty fatigued at the end and we need to take a recovery. If you're able to go from one strength training movement right into the next strength training movement without a recovery, then you probably want to just consider maybe what weights you're using unless you're specifically doing that type of training for muscular endurance. Now, set and setting are important here and your goals.
Yeah, there's so many different variables. If you're training for an endurance event, that's gonna be a different thing than if you're just training for general life and being able to still do the things that you love to do.
But ultimately, when we talk about building lean mass on our body, we can do it with a variety of rep ranges like Mackie is sharing. You can do it with higher reps. It is more challenging though, and we move more into the muscular endurance phase of training where you're able to endure for longer with that movement, but it might not necessarily impose enough demand on your system to grow the muscle.
And I do think there are trade-offs too, like, there you don't wanna be so low in reps that you have to go very heavy in weight because that will then increase your chances of injury.
For sure. And
So,
also personal
going to lighter
preference.
weights is actually a smart move in terms of not getting hurt.
Yeah, and personal preference. Like
Yeah.
I have done the 3 to 5 reps or the 5 by 5, 5 reps, 5 sets of something, which requires me to go really heavy, and I find that type of workout just personally to be dreadful. It's just not my
Yeah.
favorite kind of workout. Versus I really love more of a hypertrophy bodybuilding style of training, if you will, which is where I'm doing more 8 to 15 reps, but I am pushing myself whatever rep range I'm going in, I am going until I feel that 80, 90% effort. So let's say in a program I have to do 10 bench press and I get to the 10th rep, but I realize that I could keep going, then I'm going to keep going until I get to that 1 or 2 reps in reserve. And then I know that, okay, on set number 2, I could increase the weight because that first set wasn't challenging me enough. So these are the kinds of things that we want to pay attention to make sure that we're training optimally because I can't tell you how much time and money is wasted in the gym or working with trainers that really aren't progressing their clients. If you're not working with someone or you're not doing this yourself, where you have something called progressive overload training, where you are pushing yourself and we want to have sometimes deload weeks because our bodies, it's not going to be this linear process where you're going to adapt and increase forever, but we definitely want to challenge our body.
Your body loves homeostasis. It loves to have constants. So if you are let's say you decide that you're gonna lift 20 pounds on a certain exercise, and you do that for 10 reps. It might be really challenging the first time you do it. It might be a little bit easier the next time you do it the next week. And then the 3rd week you do it, you're like, "Oh, okay, I got this. This is not so bad." At that point, your body has adapted to that weight. It's built the strength, it's built the muscle that it needs to be able to handle that load. So that's a great thing. You've progressed your strength, you've progressed your muscle mass. But what you need to do then is to continue to give it more overload because your body's going to want to stay in that homeostasis and stay at that point.
Yeah, and this requires the effort, right? We were
Right.
saying simple, not easy,
Yeah.
because you're gonna feel pushed. You're gonna feel your nervous system is responding to this. And that is a new feeling for some people to get used to. I know it can sometimes be a little bit scary at first when you're feeling shaky in a movement or you're feeling like you can't get that last rep. And I can't tell you how many people never bring themselves to that point because they are a little bit afraid to go there. And this is where working with a coach or a trainer or having a workout buddy that you can do some spotting with, and also it's just fun to work out with people, can be really helpful and you can support each other. And you don't have to worry so much about circuit training where you need to constantly keep moving. That's for
Right.
another podcast, but especially as we get older, those workouts have diminishing returns on our investment of time. And what we want to make sure that we're doing is really focusing on good quality strength training, which we can't
Quality
always get.
movement.
Yeah, quality movement. Finding a workout buddy and having you do your bench press and they're there to spot you and then they do their bench press and you spot them. I know this sounds like very old school types of fitness, but these things work.
I find it to be super enjoyable.
It is.
Just
Yeah.
hanging out, lifting some weights, enjoying yourself in the gym. You're not always going to be breathless. You're not always going to be in that There's certainly times and places for those types of workouts where you're gassed and you're feeling like you're pushing all the way to your limits. But at the same time, these more day-to-day strength training workouts are super enjoyable for us.
They really are, especially if you're somebody who came from doing more metabolic conditioning work or like that circuit training where you're just constantly keeping your heart rate up. And the misconception, I think, is that we have to be burning a certain amount of calories in our workouts to make them effective, especially for those who are looking to lose weight. And we cannot think about our workouts being the main reason that we're burning calories in a day. Like we talked about earlier, your non exercise activity and your just body mass alone, those are the things that we want to rely on
And
to
your
burn. And
nutrition,
your nutrition. Yeah. There's,
that's the biggest.
yeah, as far as it burning calories.
Not burning calories, but not over consuming.
Oh, yes, yes, but there's thermogenesis with nutrition as well, and high
Definitely.
protein diets are something that can actually help you with your body composition without you having to do a ton of working out. As far as from a body fat reduction and weight loss perspective, if somebody is not exercising and they go on a higher protein diet, and when I say higher protein diet, I'm not saying low carb, no carb. Just really hear that. Carbs are really important for us. We need them. So we can have a high protein diet and also still eat a really good normal amount of carbohydrates and also fat. So there's no macro that's being really cut down or cut out, but we're focusing on high quality, good protein. So I just want to make sure that we understand that body weight workouts, they are great for quality movement, for mobility, and they can be effective in the beginning for someone who is deconditioned. They can be an effective tool to start to build muscle. But as you progress, you're going to need a different stressor on the body, and that is through resistance training.
Yeah, and that evolves over time, and I think as you get more comfortable with different exercises, you can try some different things and you can add in different exercises and movement patterns that will allow you to really thrive and build up your stability and balance control and be able to do things that you might not have been able to do for a while.
Yeah. And then if you're thinking, okay, so resistance training, what does she mean? Is that me doing like chest day and then back day and then a leg
Bro
day?
split. That's the bro split.
Sure, that you could do that if that's something that you like. And I recommend that for people who are resistance training like 4 or 5 days per week to do split body parts like that. But for most of my clients, they really only have 2 or 3 days a week to strength train. And 2 days per week is the recommendation to really see some results and to get the adaptations needed in your body. So if you're only working out 2 to 3 days per week, what we recommend is doing full body every single time you're strength training and focusing on compound exercises. So, not just isolated movements like a bicep curl or a tricep kickback. Those are great and you can work those muscles if you want to grow those muscles in particular because you like the way they look. You can ask Mackie, how much shoulder work do I do? Because I'm obsessed with
She does the
having,
shoulders.
I love having delts. So I grow my delts a lot. I do extra delt work. But when I'm talking about compound exercises, those are going to be your squats, your bench press, your bent over row. They're working not just your chest and back and legs. You're working a lot of different parts of your body and your whole trunk, your whole core. If you have to create a program for yourself, which we're happy to also help you create a program, but I want you to think about doing a squatting exercise, a hinging exercise, so that would be like a deadlift type of movement, and then the squatting movement patterns could also be like lunges or we're throwing those in there too.
Split squats.
Everybody loves a split squat.
Everybody's
So
favorite.
we got a squat, we've got a hinge, we've got a push, so that would be like a bench press or a push up, and then we're pulling, so that would be some sort of rowing exercise and back exercise, and then we want to do some core work like plank work, or that could even be farmer's carries, work your core.
I was
So
just about to say that, the
yeah.
carry.
So there's lots of ways that we can work our full body and we can do different exercises on different days. Let's say on you're working only working out 2 times per week. So on one workout, you're focusing on squats and shoulder pressing. And then on a different workout, you could be focusing on deadlifting and chest pressing. And then both exercises can have some back. Like one workout could have a pull up exercise, and another workout could have a single arm row. So there's so much variety in how you can do your movement, but full body is what we recommend if you're only doing 2 to 3 times per week. And then if you wanna work out more than that because you have the time or you just find it really enjoyable, like me, I do about 4, sometimes 5 days. I'm doing split body parts just because I am working body parts multiple times and I need to let them rest.
Yeah, and I think it is important to note that one of the reasons why we like to do the full body workouts for people who are working out 2 to 3 times a week, full body is great because you're gonna hit each muscle group a couple times in the week. So, let's say you were doing a split where you're just doing chest on Monday every week. You've got 6 days to recover for your muscles to recover, and it might only take 2 to 3 days for those muscles to recover fully. So, the rest of that week from Wednesday on, it's wasted time that your muscles aren't getting any stimulus. So if you're only hitting each muscle group once a week, you might be leaving something on the table. So if you're doing the full body and you're hitting your chest a couple times a week, make sure you're spreading out your workouts. That way you do get recovery time in between. Recovery is as important as the exercise itself, just because that's what allows your body to adapt to the stimulus that you gave it. But it's the same thing with the split. So even if you are doing a split like Juliet's saying, and like we do when we work out 5 times a week, we are hitting our chest multiple times. We are hitting our shoulders multiple times in the week to make sure that we're not neglecting that muscle group for the rest of the week.
Well said. Yeah, for sure. And I love that you touched on recovery because this is something that I definitely did not do a lot of. And now that I am focusing more on recovery, I'm seeing a lot more results. And I think for a lot of us, we know this, but we don't necessarily put things into practice. And
Yeah.
I promise you that you will not lose results by taking a day or two of rest. You will gain results from doing this. And find other ways of doing activity, and that could be yoga, that could be taking a long walk. It doesn't have to be completely sedentary when you take your rest. In fact, we should be moving our body every single day as much as we can through walking or some yoga or mobility or stretching. So just know that your rest days don't have to be just you sitting on the couch watching Netflix and for those of us who are eager to always keep moving, you can move on all of your rest days.
Yeah, just make sure it's easy.
Yeah, it should be you shouldn't be taxing your system. And we'll probably have a whole podcast on sleep and talk about that more, but that we're talking as when we talk about recovery, sleep is also really important. And I am not the best sleeper. That's something I'm trying to work on myself. And I know also for many women, as our hormones are changing, that really affects our sleep. So just know that if you all of a sudden are having some funky sleep stuff going on, sometimes that can be related to hormones changing and shifting. And exercise can actually really help with that. What else? Food.
Bioavailability of protein.
Yeah, the food. So that's the biggest thing here because I talked about how you don't have to work out to see body composition changes, although I really want you to because I want you to build muscle. But if you have some weight to lose and body fat to lose and you just can't seem to figure out how to get in the resistance training, I want you to at least be doing the protein because it will help change your composition and you will decrease body fat just simply by doing this.
Yeah, not only will it give you the fuel and the amino acids to help build muscles, it also there's an idea called the thermic effect of food, which means that in order to digest something, it actually costs you energy. So it costs 30% more energy to break down protein than it does simple carbs.
Mhm.
So, have you ever heard the idea that if you eat celery, it's actually negative calories? That's where that idea comes from because it's costing you energy to break down that celery and all the fiber that's in it, and there's hardly any calories in it.
Yeah. And something also with the standard American diet, it's often very low in protein in breakfast and lunch. And then many people have a large protein dinner. And when you eat in this manner, your blood levels of amino acids remain suboptimal and they never actually reach the threshold necessary to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And in addition, when protein is low, carbs and fats are likely unbalanced, causing your body to store fat and your blood sugar levels to be negatively affected.
You never wanna hear suboptimal.
Yeah. Not that we need to, like, optimize everything, because that gets really annoying to me in, like, the biohacking community. We're all human, and we're doing our best here, but we wanna have the information, at least try to feel better.
Yeah, there's basics that everybody should have covered.
Yeah. So, something that Mackie and I recommend is trying to get 30 to 40 grams of protein 3 times a day at each meal. So, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 30 to 40 grams in each of those meals. That can really help to cover at least a good baseline of having enough protein. And then, more specifically, we recommend, and this is also what is recommended, not just Mackie and I are recommending this, but the RDA for protein intake is zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. So
RDA though is pretty low.
that's what I'm going to talk
That's how
about.
much you need to survive.
Exactly. So that only equates to, let's say, for someone who is 176 pounds, that's equating to 64 grams of
Oh,
protein per
wow.
day. That's really can be low. So I want to talk about that there's a little bit of controversy around protein, not only what I was saying earlier that people think that we are over proteined, right? But really what we're seeing is that we are under protein, just given the fact that people have no muscle mass on their body. If we were over protein, we would be seeing a lot more, we would see a lot less metabolic health conditions. But there are definitely schools of thought around having a low protein diet and even a low calorie diet to help with certain diseases or things like fighting cancer. And I don't want to get into all the details around that, but I want to at least acknowledge that there are different philosophies and theories on how to eat. Of course, how many philosophies and theories do we see out there? But I don't want to, I want to at least acknowledge that there are some physicians that have done different research with cancer that can show that a lower protein, more vegan diet can support certain types of cancer. But that is in a certain circumstance. And I think this is where it's like nutrition gets very inflated a lot of times. Oh, that must mean it's good for everyone.
Yeah, and again, it comes to that mechanism idea, right?
Yeah.
Where it's, okay, this helps in this scenario, so that means it's good for everything,
Yeah.
just
Same with
because it's good at
keto.
that particular mechanism. Right, keto is great for certain people who have allergies.
Actually, keto is great for people who have seizures. And also, they found it can be great for people who have autism that can help with cognition. But that's in a certain subset of people. That's not, when we look at just general health and wellness, keto would have a negative benefit. So
Yeah.
we just have to take all of these things with a grain of salt. But I try to cover all the bases because I do a lot of research and I've been studying this for over 15 years. I'm not saying I am the expert of the experts. I just see that there are different ways to go about nutrition, but I want to share with you more of a general
Yeah.
what we find is really helpful for the everyday athlete who is maybe even not metabolically healthy. If you're not metabolically healthy, this definitely then really applies to you, or someone who wants to stay metabolically healthy. So, what we are recommending that is beyond the RDA of very, very low, low, just survival protein, we're recommending zero point 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Okay. Now, if you are looking to lose weight, you can calculate that based off of your ideal weight. So let's say you weigh 175 pounds, but you'd like to weigh 150 pounds and you were doing the 1 gram per pound of body weight, then 150 grams of protein would be your goal.
Same thing if you're trying to gain weight. So if you're at 170 and you want to go to 180, calculate it based off of the 180.
And there used to be bro science around that you could only absorb so much protein at any given time, but there are new studies that are showing some changes in that. We still have to do more research, but either way, it's okay to have more than 30 to 40 grams in a meal, even if your body's not utilizing all of that for muscle protein synthesis, it's using it for energy and fuel.
Yeah, it's a very low, you're not going to hurt yourself by having more protein.
Yeah, and I think as far as it affecting your kidneys, which was something that people were concerned about, that is not going to impact. So you don't
Yeah.
have to worry
It's
about
very
that.
low risk reward situation. So if you have 40 grams of protein in your meal, if that extra 10 grams isn't absorbed as much as maybe the first 30, no big deal.
Yeah, and With protein, there's different bioavailability of protein, which is means how your body's able to actually absorb that protein. Something that might say 25 grams of protein per serving, depending on what kind of protein it is, you might not be absorbing all of that protein. And because it may not have all of the amino acids required to have that be a complete protein for your body to absorb.
Yeah, the chart that they've done it off of is based off of whey protein. So they say whey protein is the ultimate in being absorbed by the body. So that's a one. There are things that go beyond one, and I forget exactly what they are. I can look it up real
Egg
quick.
whites? Egg
Um,
whites are 100%. I know that.
okay,
So
so
that
egg whites are up there.
Mhm.
A lot of dairy is very high. If you look at any of your lean meats, chicken, turkey, those are going to be in the high 90s. So they're very good. Red meat is in the low 90s. And then if you start to look at plant protein, then it starts to get a little bit lower.
Yeah, which I love plant protein and
We take it.
we take it daily. Mackie and I, we've been doing a vegan protein powder for over 10 years. Plant Fusion is our favorite protein powder. It's a complete protein in that all of the 9 essential amino acids that you need to have that absorption is added into this protein. So we really use it as a great way to supplement, and I just prefer the taste of it, and also whey protein sometimes can give my stomach a little bit of upset, so I've just found that to be the one that I really like. So plant proteins are also a great option. Tempeh is wonderful, tofu. Just know that you may need more protein if you're doing a vegan vegetarian diet to get the amount that we're talking about because like Mackie's saying, it's just not being fully absorbed in your body.
Yeah, so I pulled up the list. So your pea protein concentrate, which is what we have a combination of pea protein and rice protein. It's right around 89%. So this is a case where being consistent is much better than being perfect, right? So if we're able to, because we like the taste of the plant protein, because it doesn't really give us much stomach upset as much as whey might, just personally, we're able to take it every day as opposed to if we were stuck taking whey or casein protein, we might not take it as much.
I definitely wouldn't, because I don't like the taste of it.
Right.
That this has this I've always not loved the taste of dairy. I'm picky with my dairy, and it definitely is like a dairy product. But yeah, if I had to do that, then I wouldn't supplement with protein. I'd probably be missing out on a lot of protein every day.
It's worth noting that so beef is 92% absorbed. Soy protein is just as good as whey protein in terms of absorption. So if you are vegan or vegetarian and you want to do the soy protein, that's going to give you whatever it says on the label. So if it says it's 20 grams of protein, that's what you're going to absorb.
Yeah, the only thing with soy protein is that it can be a little bit more mm, what's it can be a little bit more it can be a little bit more processed and have
Sure.
and when we think about soy, it's one of the worst crops as far as pesticides and GMO. So you just want to make sure that when you're
Yeah.
doing soy, you're getting really high quality, the highest of the high. And
One
it's the
thing
same thing
though,
for whey though too. Like we want you want to
yeah, you
try
want to
to
have grass fed.
grass fed, grass finished even because even I know we think about animal protein being not ideal in terms of getting hormones and antibiotics, but you also have to think about plant protein too with tons of pesticides and GMOs. Like Mackie said, it's not going to be perfect.
I try not to go too far down the rabbit hole because you can poke holes in everything.
Very true.
There is no perfect food. There's nothing that you can say, this is the food that everybody needs to eat for the rest of their life because it's just not, there's just, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like even years ago, the perfect example of this was kale. When we were coming out of nutrition school, kale was the hot thing. Everybody was like, oh, got to eat kale, 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 kale,
Superfood.
superfood. And then a couple years later, people are like, "Don't eat raw kale. If you have it raw, then you're not able to absorb it because it's not broken down enough. Your body can't break it down." So there's things with everything, and pesticides on top of that.
By the way, I
Whatever,
love raw kale salad
it's the
and I
best.
have really good poops the next day when I eat it. But to each their own with this. But understand that, like Mackie said, yeah, there can be holes poked in everything. I saw that there's like a viral reel going around right now, and it's somebody opening up their fridge and looking at all the items, and then there's, like, an Instagram influencer on their phone going, "Don't eat eggs because eggs are blah," and then the person puts the eggs down, and then they go over to put oat milk in their coffee. "Don't have oat milk because of blah." So and then at the end, they're like, "Well, I guess I can't eat anything because everything is bad for me."
Yeah,
And that's
it
not true.
it's not true. You
Not
have
at
to eat something,
yeah.
obviously, somebody's healthy.
Yeah. There's no perfect diet, there's no ideal, but protein is something that we definitely wanna make sure that we get enough of in our life, and if you wanna be more plant-based with it, then just get a variety. That's really important. Make sure you're getting a variety of proteins and
Yeah,
mhm,
and
be
with our plant fusion protein, it does include all of the essential amino acids, so that's where something like rice and beans comes into play. Because if you have rice and beans, you're gonna get the full spectrum of your essential amino
and
acids.
you also don't need to eat those together. So that was something
Right,
people thought, "Oh, I have to eat the rice and the beans in one setting." You could have rice for lunch and you can have beans at dinner.
sure,
Your body is, you
but
know
rice and beans together is so
it
good.
is, but don't worry about it if you're having them separate, that it's not gonna work. You're not gonna get the complete proteins.
One thing I wanna touch on real quick before we move on is if I look at this chart of the absorption of protein, one thing that comes on this list actually very low. So if you think about your traditional protein sources, they're all in the 90 plus range. As long as you're having something that's 90 plus as your main protein source for that meal, you're probably pretty well off. But one thing that I hear so often is people say, "Oh, I'm gonna have a bag of nuts as a snack. I can get some protein." The reality of that is that you're not getting a ton of protein from nuts. If you look at peanuts, you're getting 52% of whatever the protein is absorbable by your body,
And it's very low protein
which
because a
are it's
tablespoon
already fairly low.
yeah, a
Yeah.
tablespoon of peanut butter is only giving you 4 I believe 4 or 5 grams of
4
protein.
grams, and
Yeah.
then if you're only gonna absorb 50% of that, you're getting 2 grams.
Yeah,
So
so those are negligible little amounts of protein throughout the day, but we can't like you're saying, we can't consider
don't
those to be
don't
your sources.
don't think about that as your main protein source. Yeah.
Yeah, and also with things like nuts and nut butter, fat has the highest calories per gram. So carbs and protein are going to be 1 calorie is going to be 4 grams or no, I'm sorry, 4 do you like how I do this for a living and I'm dyslexic? I know the answer to it, I just have to say it probably. So for you're getting per gram of protein and carb, you're getting 4 calories per gram. For fat, you're getting 9 calories per gram. So it's more than double. And fat, it's very easy to eat more than enough nuts and nut butter, trust me. That's one of my favorite foods is
It
peanut
goes
butter. I
fast.
wanna put that on everything. So, when we're thinking, "Oh, I'm just getting a lot of protein," those are definitely foods we wouldn't consider as ways of getting your protein. And happy to share with you, I created a one-sheeter of everything that we are talking about and more as far as what to think about on a daily basis to have a well-balanced diet with trying to build muscle. So if that's something that you're interested in, just shoot me a DM and I can send you my little PDF that I've created to give you a cheat sheet of everything. Cause I know it can be overwhelming to remember everything that we talked about. And I'll try to sum it up in a moment as we close the podcast out.
At Juliet Root, Juliet underscore root, Juliet underscore root, ROOT on Instagram.
It's in the show notes too, our Instagram profiles, just so you know.
Thank you.
You don't have to remember any of this. I'm not going to get into details about other macronutrients, which are really important, and we can touch on them another time. I think I said that carbohydrates are very, very important and help shuttle the protein in. So we don't want to ignore them. We do not want a high protein, low carb, no carb diet. Make sure you are getting enough carbohydrates, especially if you are working out. You need them for fuel, we need them for our brain health. Yeah, you could go on a keto diet, you can go on a carnivore diet, but there are repercussions to that in the long term, and you'll see a lot of weight loss happen in the beginning typically because you're most likely in a calorie deficit with them and because protein is helping you burn more calories. You'll notice that those diets do work, but they're as far as we're talking about for health over the long term and feeling good and especially hormonal health, those are not diets that we would recommend.
Whenever you look at any diet, doesn't matter what it is, you have to think about, can I stick with this for the long run? And by long run, I mean forever.
Yeah.
So the idea is, if you can stick to this diet and this is really hard and I'm just going to do it for a month and then I'm going to lose all this weight and I'll be great, it's not going to work because you're just going to gain that weight right back as soon as you go off of it. So by doing anything, whether it's a plan that we give you or a diet book or anything that you find, think about, how is this going to work for me in the long run? Does this allow me the flexibility to do the things that I want to do? I want to go on vacation. I want to go out to restaurants. I want to have barbecues. Does this allow you to do those things that you want to do?
And if you're strength training and you're eating the right amount of macronutrients, your protein, your carbs, and your fat are in a really good ratio for blood sugar stabilization, then, like I mentioned earlier, you have a lot of flexibility not only with being able to go out and be on vacation. You have flexibility always in how you eat. You can have a cookie every day. You can have two cookies every day. It doesn't You can fit all of these things into your life and still get the results that you're looking for and be a healthy individual. So, this binary approach that there are good foods and there are bad foods is something that we need to move away from because it's actually harming us versus helping us. And when we say that no food is off limits, the other night I just really was craving some Sour Patch Kids and I had some Sour Patch Kids. And
Did
that's
you
not
wake up weighing 10 more
I
pounds?
didn't, and it's also not something that I feel the need to have often at all. I probably have it a few times a year, but it was just a moment of fun and I enjoyed eating that candy and it fit in my day as far as the amount of activity I was doing. And of course, I know that there's chemical additives in there and some of them are linked to X, Y, and Z health condition, but having 10 Sour Patch Kids a few times a year is the least of my concerns. We are lying on a couch and sleeping in a bed that's off gassing, right? And we're walking down the street and taking in car exhaustion. And
You're
so
going down the rabbit holes again.
I'm just making a point for people that we don't need to be freaking out about every little ingredient all the time in our food. And this is coming from the girl who, for years, was so hyper aware of all the things because this is what I studied. And I went to an integrative nutrition school where it was all a holistic approach about food as medicine. Of course, I knew just how quote unquote bad certain things are for our health, but we can't look at those things in a vacuum.
I agree.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, guys, get some resistance training. Make sure that you're pushing yourself so that you have the adaptation that your body needs to actually see results. Make sure you're eating enough protein along with that. And if you're not resistance training yet, at least start with the protein and then get on a plan of thinking about at least 2 to 3 times per week, throwing in some resistance training and start where you're at. Technique is the most important thing to learn, and it will help you tenfold in the future if you schedule a session with a trainer, just 1 or 2 sessions, and I'm not saying it's me because I am completely waitlisted right now for one-on-one Zoom coaching, but find someone in your local area who will teach you how to do a squat properly, how to do a deadlift properly, and then you can have confidence to do these exercises that will help you so much in the long run.
It's an investment in your future.
Big time. All right, we love you guys. Don't forget to subscribe? This isn't YouTube.
Oh, it is YouTube.
Oh, don't
Check it
break
out. If you are somebody who likes the visual side of things, we are posting these on YouTube
what
now.
I don't like visually is that you set up my camera so people look at my side profile the entire time.
We can, when we get our new studio, we'll
Coming
upgrade.
from the girl who was so self-conscious about her nose, and I'm just like, "Whatever," but this is not my best angle,
So if
just
you want to
saying.
see Juliet's not best angle, check it out on
Yeah, if
YouTube.
you wanna see just a full-on side profile the whole
Just
time.
search Longevity Lab.
And please rate us on Spotify as well as Apple, and you can write a review. And that would be so helpful and wonderful so we can spread the word. And if we have clips up that we throw, share them with your friends, and we will see you next time.